Right, and welcome back to your Breakfast Central on News Central. Today, Monday, the 4th of November 2019. We'll be going straight to business. But just to let you know, you can always reach us right here on social media at News Central TV, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. You can also watch us live on YouTube and log on to the website. That's www.newscentral.africa. But don't forget to use the hashtag for this program, NC Breakfast Central. So straight we go to business as usual, where we review last week's biggest topics and what's ahead for this week. And to get through these and more, I have once again Rotus Oddiri, editor of Business Insider SSA. Rotus, morning. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Right, lots to chime from the weekend and chew on. MTN cancels over 300 million stake sale in Botswana's Mascom. This will have huge implications for both parties, won't it?
Yes, it does. Really quick, before we get into that, last week I made a slight error. I was comparing the Russian population to the population of New York. I actually meant to compare the Russians' economy to the economy of New York when we're talking about Russia wiping off debt for African nations. So just to get that out of the way, make sure. So because Russia's population is way higher than the United States. Anyway, for MTN, if there's a deal that's about to be...
They've cancelled a plan to sell 53%
of their stake in Mascom. Mascom is the market share leader in Botswana as far as telecoms is concerned. And so when a deal is about to be closed, say you're about to sell me your car, and you decide to pull out and no longer sell it to me, the buyer is the one that's going to be mainly affected. So there's a Zimbabwean billionaire by the name of Misiyiwa. He owns a company called Econet, which has about a 7% stake.
Is it the same Econet that we used to know back in West Africa?
Right. So in Botswana, and so. He intended to take the company that is Mascom public and wanted to list them on the Botswana Stock Exchange, but he's a minority shareholder. He's only got a 7% stake. His intention was to get this 53% stake from MTN, give him a 60% stake, and then he would have the controlling stake enough to take the company public. Because he's been having some a little bit of resistance from a Botswana pension fund, which owns about 40% of the company. So he's the main one that's being affected. His dreams to take the company public, but for customers of Mascom, they won't actually see any difference. It's still business as usual, but he's the main one that's being affected.
Because you get this with the deals when it comes to the telecoms industry, where you hear so much money, perhaps not up for grabs, but could be potentially be lost. But what about job security, job losses, especially when it comes to Mascom? Because I think this is where the average Botswanan should be more worried about, because this is investment, that might go to the drain. Yeah,
well, in terms of job losses, I mean, I wouldn't really worry much, because what MTN is doing here is that they are there's a 3-year plan to divest their investments in a number of countries where they are not where they feel that they don't have the market share that they should have. Now, of course, with their investment in Mascom, they do have like a leading market share, but they're generally divesting. So this is really about MTN just pulling out from certain markets. Now, to your point though, will there be job losses? Well, yes, there is a concern. Actually, I should reverse that. There is a concern, because if they're completely pulling out of the market, then that means that staff and so on would have to find jobs elsewhere. So that is actually correct. I kept thinking in terms of the billionaire and what he's
but because and it's Botswana we're talking about. They just inaugurated the president again the other day. We know the economy is stable. We talked about the stable democracies in Africa. There's a huge diamond reserve. So if this happens, we shouldn't really lose sleep.
Actually, I mean, if they do, so what the thing is, this deal will still happen. They're saying that, according to the CFO, I think his name is Ralph Mupita, he's saying that when they get a proper offer, they will actually sell their stake. So actually, you're actually correct. There will actually, if they're pulling out of that market, there will actually be some job losses related to that. So it's something that is actually a concern.
Also, we have to keep an eye on this one. MTN cancelling 300 million stake in Botswana's Mascom Wireless telecoms there. Let's move over, talk about one in South Africa. Moving down to the south of the country. Well, we know that most South Africans are out of work again in the third quarter of 2019, as new figures show. Labour Force survey reports about 29.1% in unemployment, the highest in 16 years for this country.
South Africa's unemployment issues are deep. They are complex and they are sad. It goes back, I mean, there's so many issues that key into this. It starts with the economic legacy of apartheid.
Good.
Back then, black South Africans were moved out of the city centers far away. They were denied education opportunities.
Can we just make it clear that this unemployment is basically affecting the blacks?
Yes, that they are the ones mainly affected. So because during the apartheid period, they were not allowed to upskill and be properly educated because they were shut out from a number of jobs, they were basically a high number of unskilled workers, and it helped out for owners of farms and owners of mines and so on, which were mostly white owners because of the low skilled labor. But so when South Africa started to grow, its economy started to grow after apartheid was over, and it's the most industrialized economy in Africa. There was a divergence, a massive divergence between skilled and unskilled. So most of the growth you've seen in South Africa with mining and agriculture becoming more mechanized, there was less demand for the unskilled labor of blacks. So that's kind of has tied into this. But there's also issues with the ANC and some of the policies that they brought in. Wanting to make sure that if you were buying a stake in a mining company, you allocated much larger equity to a black shareholder. It gave investors chills, and so if you don't have investment coming into certain most of these sectors, you're not going to have job growth. So there's a number of issues, but there must mainly one of the main things.
Do we go back to the South African government and slam this out? Okay, this is what the South African government, this is their fault. Can they do anything?
Right. So Zuma unfortunately caused a lot of damage. Yes, the South African government, a lot of enterprises. We talked about Eskom. About 2 weeks ago, I was here talking about Eskom and how they needed to break up and be privatized. Most of the state-owned enterprises in South Africa are loss-making, not run efficiently. So it's neat, as you've mentioned now, the government needs to privatize most of these state-owned enterprises so that they can be run by private hands. They can hire people and add to that. But Zuma did a lot of damage to the South Africa, the looting, bad policies, the state-owned enterprises. So
because we're experiencing in recent weeks, all about state capture inquiry that's been going on. Jacob Zuma, and many have heard his cronies being called upon for questioning. Many might see that there's no opportunities lost in that last decade where he was in power, because this says it's the highest in 16 years.
Yeah, it is. And
in South Africa. Where did these people go? Because these are young people. They will be, yes, largely unskilled labor. But what about those who've been to school, and find themselves without work?
Right.
That creates more of a problem.
It creates a big problem, and it builds upon itself down the road. I think about 40% of 15 to 24-year-olds in South Africa, that's youth, 15 to 24-year-olds, grow up in a family without somebody that has a job. So there's no role model there.
Those are really
it's ugly stats.
It's ugly stats. When you put it in that context, it's grim.
It's grim. And so the new president, Mamfosa, he's saying the right things. He's been running around the country looking for investment to come in, because foreign direct investment, when it comes in, you are building a permanent structure in a country, and that permanent structure will want to hire people.
I'm forced to ask this question. Foreign direct investment into South Africa, is that not foreign direct white investment again?
Well, okay, so that's a good point. But so the thing is, education has to play into this. So the black South Africans that are not well educated, they have to make an investment in education. So part of that foreign direct investment, if hopefully it was to go into the education sector, I mean, there's manufacturing, there's oil and gas, there's mining, all those things. But if part of that foreign direct investment was to go into education, and Mamfosa is focused on educating more young black South Africans to give them the skills needed that the whites have that are getting them jobs, then you can possibly see some improvement there. But yeah, to your point, there is a number of these investments are attracted by the white collar side of the country.
All right, let's come down to West Africa, shall we? And all about the aviation sector and AMCON, where the CEO, Ahmed Kuru, he's been calling on the Nigerian government to convert Arik Air into the country's national carrier. And this is one sector that, many will be quite skeptical about because we know AMCON took over the ownership of Arik back in 2017. So where does that leave these comments from Kuru about the government?
What you want to make them? Yeah. So I've if you look at the history of state-owned airlines, it hasn't been a good picture, especially with Nigeria. There's been one failed airline after another. Look, remember, I think it was Nigerian Air or Air Nigeria recently that didn't materialize despite all the money they put into it and
despite
everything.
all the hype.
Exactly. So what his point is, AMCON already owns Arik. They took over them. They've been holding them since 2017. What are you going to do with it? And the thing is, if somebody wanted to buy it, because the whole point is that you take over a company that's in debt, you restructure it, you get it going again, and then somebody comes and buys it off of you. But it's been 2017 now, we're going into 2020. That's 3 years now. Nobody has wanted to buy it. So it's like, look, you own it already, might as well nationalize it and make it a national airline. But the minister, I think Sirika, he's come out and said that no, he disagrees, that they don't have the capacity to do it. So what are you going to do with the asset? You know, you have to do something with it.
What about the fleets?
Yeah, the fleets, they're there and it's operating. So again, just to be clear, I am not in support of governments owning airlines, because I think despite Ethiopian Airlines, I can't think of any other successful. South African Airlines is okay. But they've had to be bailed out multiple times by government because the margins are very thin. So I don't trust the Nigerian government to be able to do this effectively. But the key thing here is that his point is you already own it. So
make it a national carrier.
Yeah, exactly. Or that's what are you going to do with it? Because you haven't sold it yet.
Maybe to play devil advocate for Kuru here, Nigeria is a big country.
It is.
It's the time they had the national carriers. Since Nigeria Airways, went burst back in the 90s. There have been several attempts to revive that spirit. We had Air Nigeria coupled up with all the hype.
Virgin Nigeria,
Branson went back with his money. And this time
they chased him away.
he couldn't deal.
Right.
This is a country of over 200 million people.
Very true.
The largest black country in the world.
Very true.
And an African country. Booming economy when you look at the southern parts of the country. At least this national carrier should be there. To help the economy. What about local flights to really promote local,
transit as well?
Yeah.
So theoretically, it makes sense. Theoretically, if you think about Nigeria being a central hub for Western Africa, for Sub-Saharan Africa, it would make sense. But the problem is that the Nigerian government has such a bad track record of maintenance. So maybe what they could do is they would own it and allow it to be run by private hands, like Mascom in South Africa. So you get the state out of running it, maybe just, you take a back seat and you let the private hands run it because they have the expertise. But again, there's a lot of competition. I mean, if you think about all the foreign airlines that fly into Nigeria, as big as it is, so they are adjusting for market share with others. And, it's funny, South African Airlines advertises in Nigeria. So if you want to go to Johannesburg or Cape Town, you're going to use them. So
direct.
If Arik wants to come in, they're going to have to fight for market share with that company and fight for other companies, airlines going to Ethiopia. So the competition is high. It would take some really expert hands to run it. But the case again is that, look, you already have the asset. If you don't sell it, what will you do with it? Might as well just make it a national.
All right, so we've got to go, but we'll be tracking stories about Kenya, Safaricom planning a joint bid with South Africa as Vodacom, and Sudan agrees reforms with the World Bank and IMF. Some of these stories we are looking to track it in the coming days, and I'm sure Rotus will be around to check it out for us.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Indeed.
Always good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.